Sunday morning used to sound different. Before smartphones, streaming, and stores that never seemed to close, an American home could change its entire rhythm for one day of the week. The alarm might ring a little later, but the house was rarely lazy. Somewhere, a coffee percolator was beginning to bubble. Good clothes were being pulled from closets, and someone was reminding the children not to wrinkle anything before it was time to leave. For families across the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, Sunday was more than a day off. It was a collection of small rituals repeated so often that nobody thought they would ever disappear. Some families went to church, some visited grandparents, some stayed home. Traditions differed by region, religion, and household, but the slower pace of Sunday was familiar to millions. And if you grew up in one of those homes, a few of these memories may bring back an entire room, an entire meal, or a voice you have not heard in years. Here are 15 Sunday rituals that once made the American home feel unmistakably like Sunday. 1. Wearing the good clothes. Sunday clothes were not simply clean clothes. In many homes, they were the clothes that spent most of the week waiting for a special reason to come out. For children, that could mean polished shoes, a pressed shirt, a dress that required a little more care, or a jacket that suddenly made an ordinary kid look ready for a family photograph. Parents often dress differently too. Dad might wear a suit, sport coat, or his better shirt and tie. Mom might choose a dress, gloves, a hat, or jewelry that did not appear during the weekday rush. The transformation changed the mood of the house. Children who had spent Saturday running through yards and climbing trees were now being told to stand still while collars were straightened and hair was combed. And there was always that warning: do not get dirty before we leave. Even families without a formal Sunday destination often understood the idea of keeping something for good. Clothing carried that distinction in a way that feels less common today. Years later, people may forget the exact pattern of the shirt or dress, but they remember the feeling of being buttoned, polished, combed, and inspected before Sunday truly began. 2. The house getting quiet before everyone left. Weekday mornings could be frantic, but Sunday had its own kind of preparation. Bedroom doors opened and closed. Water ran in the bathroom. A hairbrush moved quickly through stubborn hair. Someone called from another room that it was almost time to go. Then, just before the family left, there was often a strange little pause. The kitchen had been tidied. Beds might already be made. The television was off. The good clothes were on. Everyone was waiting for the last person to be ready. Parents checked whether doors were locked, whether the stove was off, and whether every child was actually in the car. That brief silence made the house feel different, almost formal. A place that had been full of Saturday noise suddenly seemed to be holding its breath. When the family finally pulled away, the room sat empty for a few hours, waiting for everyone to return hungry. 3. Sunday church for millions of families. For millions of American families, church was one of the strongest anchors of Sunday life. The denomination, service, customs, and length of the morning varied enormously, but the family routine around it could be remarkably memorable. Children learned where the family usually sat. They recognized familiar faces several rows away. They knew which adults would stop their parents afterward and turn a quick goodbye into another 15 minutes. There were hymnals, bulletins, polished shoes, whispers, coughs, and the challenge of sitting still when a child would rather be anywhere else. For some, Sunday school came before or after the main service. For others, church meant choir robes, collection plates, fellowship halls, and conversations on the steps outside. Not every American family attended church, of course, and Sunday traditions were never identical. But for those who did, the weekly trip became tied to family memory as strongly as any meal or holiday. Decades later, a hymn, the smell of an old wooden sanctuary, or the sight of a child in uncomfortable dress shoes can bring the whole morning back. 4. Stopping to talk instead of rushing home. Leaving the Sunday gathering did not always mean leaving immediately. Adults stood in small groups and talked. Children waited nearby, wandered toward friends, or quietly hoped their parents would finish the conversation soon. In church parking lots, on sidewalks, and outside neighborhood homes, Sunday created time for the kind of casual conversation that rarely needed an appointment. Someone asked about a relative. Someone mentioned a new baby, a sick neighbor, a job, a garden, or who had been seen in town. Children absorbed more of these conversations than adults realized. This was how family news and neighborhood news traveled before group texts and social media. Sometimes the delay felt endless to a child sitting in the back seat. Looking back, it can feel almost luxurious. People had somewhere to go, but for a few minutes, they did not act as though every minute had to be saved. 5. Coming home to a serious Sunday dinner. For many households, the biggest meal of Sunday came earlier than the weekday supper. Depending on the family and region, it might be called Sunday dinner even when it was served in the afternoon. The menu was rarely universal, but the idea was familiar. Sunday was a good day for a roast. Fried chicken, ham, pot roast, mashed potatoes, gravy, vegetables, rolls, or another meal that took more time than a rushed weekday dinner. The smell could greet the family the moment the door opened. Some dishes had been prepared before everyone left. Others began as soon as the family returned, with good clothes quickly changed before anyone was allowed too close to the kitchen. Children learned that Sunday dinner could not be hurried just because they were hungry. Plates, serving bowls, and utensils appeared. Sometimes the better dishes came out. Sometimes everything was ordinary, except the amount of food and the number of people around the table. What made the meal memorable was not a perfect menu. It was the sense that everyone was expected to stop and be there. 6. Grandma and Grandpa showing up, or going to their house. Sunday belonged to grandparents and countless families. Sometimes Grandma and Grandpa arrived for dinner. Sometimes the whole family drove across town, across the county, or down a familiar rural road to visit them. Children knew the house before they knew the address. They knew which chair belonged to Grandpa, what was kept in Grandma's kitchen, and which room still seemed unchanged from another generation. A grandparent's home could have its own Sunday smells. Coffee, gravy, furniture polish, baked bread, pie, or something simmering on the stove. Adults talked at the table long after children had finished eating. The kids might disappear into a yard, a spare room, a porch, or a basement filled with objects that seemed ancient and fascinating. These visits were so routine that they did not always feel important at the time. Only much later did many people realize that an ordinary Sunday afternoon had been giving them hours with grandparents they would one day wish they could visit again. 7. The long-distance phone call that had to count. Sunday could also be a day for calling relatives who lived too far away to visit. Before unlimited calling plans, families paid attention to long-distance telephone costs, and rates varied by time, distance, and telephone company. That meant a family call could feel like an event rather than a casual background habit. Someone dialed carefully. When the relative answered, the receiver might be passed from one family member to another. A child could be summoned with, "Come say hello to Grandma," even if that child suddenly had no idea what to say. Conversations often included the same essential questions. How are you? How is school? How is work? Is everyone feeling all right? The telephone cord kept the conversation physically tied to one part of the house. And because the call cost money, nobody assumed they could simply stay connected all afternoon. Those calls were shorter than today's video chats, but hearing a distant voice on Sunday could make hundreds of miles feel temporarily smaller. 8. Reading the thick Sunday newspaper. The Sunday newspaper could seem enormous to a child. It arrived with sections that spread across the table, sofa, or living room floor. National news, local news, sports, comics, advertisements, classified listings, and colorful store circulars. Different family members claimed different pieces. Dad might reach for sports or the front section. Mom might look through advertisements, features, or coupons. Children waited for the comics. The paper did not stay neat for long. Sections were folded backward, passed across the room, left on chairs, and rescued from underneath someone else's stack. Sale advertisements could quietly shape the coming week. Grocery coupons were clipped, department store pages were studied. Classified ads offered cars, furniture, jobs, and possibilities. Reading the Sunday paper was individual and communal at the same time. Everyone could be doing something different while sharing the same room. The rustle of those oversized pages became part of the soundtrack of a slow Sunday. 9. Children fighting over the Sunday comics. For many children, the newspaper had one section that mattered more than all the others. The Sunday comics were bigger, brighter, and more exciting than the black and white strips that appeared during the week. Children unfolded pages across the floor and followed familiar characters from panel to panel. Brothers and sisters sometimes negotiated who got the section first. A parent might remove another part of the paper and tell everyone to stop pulling before something tore. The comics did not move, beep, or play sound. They waited for the reader. A child could study the drawings, reread a favorite joke, or linger over a page without an algorithm immediately presenting the next distraction. For some families, the comics were also shared across generations. Adults had favorite strips too. That simple bundle of colored newsprint gave Sunday morning a small reward that arrived only once a week. 10. Television that felt different on Sunday. Sunday television had a different personality from Saturday morning cartoons and weekday evening programs. Schedules varied by year and city, but many viewers remember a mix of religious broadcasts, public affairs programs, sports, family programming, movies, and network staples. Because households had only a limited number of channels, television viewing often became a family decision rather than an individual one. Someone walked to the set or used the dial. The picture appeared, sometimes after a moment of electronic glow, and the room settled around whatever was on. During football season, the television could become the center of the afternoon. In other homes, a movie, variety program, or familiar Sunday night series marked the final hours before Monday. There was no library of thousands of programs waiting on demand. If something good was scheduled, the family watched when it aired. If nothing interesting was on, the television simply was not very useful. That limitation gave certain Sunday programs a powerful place in memory. 11. Dad falling asleep in his chair. Some Sunday rituals were never officially announced. After a large meal, a busy week, and a newspaper or television program, Dad or Grandpa might settle into a favorite chair and slowly disappear into an afternoon nap. The newspaper could droop. Eyeglasses might slide slightly. The television continued playing to an audience of one sleeping adult. Children quickly learned the strange rules surrounding this nap. They were expected to keep the noise down, even though the sleeping person might later insist, "I wasn't asleep." A child changing the television channel could produce an immediate response from someone who had supposedly missed nothing. The Sunday chair became almost a stage for this tiny family comedy. Many adults who once laughed at their fathers for sleeping through Sunday afternoon eventually discovered themselves doing exactly the same thing. 12. Kids being told to go outside. Sunday was quieter, but children were still children. Once the formal part of the day was over and good clothes had been changed, parents often wanted the kids out of the house for a while. That could mean bicycles, a backyard, a ball, the porch, neighborhood friends, or simply wandering within whatever boundaries the family allowed. Children might hear one basic instruction: be back by dinner, or be back before it gets dark. On some Sundays, the neighborhood itself seemed sleepy. Stores might be closed or operating limited hours. Streets could feel less busy. Adults rested, while children found their own entertainment. There was no expectation that every hour needed an organized activity. A stick, a bicycle, a patch of grass, a few friends, and enough imagination could occupy the afternoon. By late day, children returned with grass stains, dusty shoes, and the unmistakable look of having forgotten that Monday existed. 13. Sunday drives with no urgent destination. Some families climbed into the car on Sunday afternoon without a destination that would make sense to a modern navigation app. They went for a drive. The route might pass farms, new subdivisions, relatives' houses, a lake, a park, a construction project, or a part of town the parents wanted to see. Gas was not always cheap, and Sunday drives were not universal, especially during periods of fuel shortages. But the tradition remains a strong memory for many families. Children watched scenery through the windows, argued over space in the back seat, and asked questions about where they were going. Sometimes the answer was simply, "We're just driving." A stop for ice cream or a soft drink could turn the trip into a treat. The point was not efficiency. The drive itself was the activity. In a culture now built around arriving quickly, the memory of going nowhere in particular can feel surprisingly peaceful. 14. Getting ready for Monday before bed. Sunday evening eventually changed mood. The long afternoon faded, the light outside softened, and Monday began to make its presence known before anyone actually went to bed. School clothes had to be found. Shoes might need attention. Homework that had been ignored since Friday suddenly became urgent. Parents asked whether everything was ready for the morning. Lunch plans were made. School papers were located. A missing book could turn a peaceful house into a last-minute search. Adults had their own Monday preparations: work clothes, alarm clocks, packed items, and the mental shift back toward the weekday schedule. Children felt the weekend shrinking. Sunday night had a particular mixture of comfort and dread. Everyone was still home, but the freedom of Saturday already felt far away. That feeling may be one of the most unchanged Sunday traditions of all. 15. The family gathering around one last Sunday night program. Before every bedroom had its own screen, the family television could gather nearly everyone into one room. Sunday night was especially good at creating that shared audience. The exact program depended on the decade, the network, and the household. Some families watched variety shows, dramas, movies, or other weekly favorites. What mattered was the ritual of knowing that a certain program meant the weekend was almost over. Children stretched out on the floor. Parents took their usual seats. Someone might bring a bowl of popcorn or a small snack from the kitchen. Commercial breaks were chances to get a drink, use the bathroom, or hurry back before the program resumed. Nobody paused the show. Nobody watched a different episode on a phone in the same room. For 1 hour, millions of families experienced entertainment according to the same clock. Then the closing credits arrived. Parents announced that it was bedtime, and the spell of Sunday was broken. Tomorrow meant alarm clocks, school buses, packed lunches, work, chores, and the ordinary week all over again. None of these rituals belonged to every family, and no single version of Sunday defined America. But together they recall a time when one day of the week often moved at a noticeably different speed. Sunday had its inconveniences. Children got bored. Adults still had work to do. Family dinners were not always peaceful, and long visits could feel endless. Yet distance has a way of revealing what those routines quietly gave people. Repeated time in the same rooms, at the same tables, with many of the same faces. The good clothes, the newspaper, the afternoon drive, the phone call, the nap in the chair, and the television program were ordinary things. That may be exactly why they became such powerful memories. If one of these Sunday rituals brought someone back to mine, then for a moment, an old American home has opened its door again. And maybe the strongest memory is not what your family did on Sunday. It is simply remembering who was there.